This video is not medical advice. We have examined no living patients. Our only case is a skeleton from 1543. He has been stable ever since. In 1913, American state fairs were scoring babies out of 1,000 points. Head shape counted. So did the tonsils. Parents brought children between 6 months and 4 years to the fairground. A doctor and a nurse measured them and filled in a card. The stated aim was to improve infant health, and it was not a fringe movement. By the next year, contests ran in all but 3 states. The comparison to livestock was not an accusation. It was printed as the selling point. In 2019, a New Jersey company began ranking IVF embryos by predicted disease risk. No tint, no ribbon. Before software can rank an embryo, a clinic has to make several. 2 weeks of injections, then retrieval under sedation, then a laboratory and a bill. The ranking is added at the end and advertised first. 4 embryos are growing in a dish. Around day 5, a technician opens the shell with a laser and takes about 5 cells from each. They come off the outer layer that becomes placenta. There's so little of it that the lab amplifies it thousands of times over and sequences the copies. Each embryo comes back with a number. The dish is now a spreadsheet. Then the numbers are sorted and one embryo goes to the top. Nothing has been cured. A row has moved. A cycle averages $12,400 before medication and before any genetic testing at all. The rankings build per embryo. The evidence has confidence intervals. The invoice does not. The report comes back as a list of conditions. It can contain cystic fibrosis and Crab disease. It can also contain coronary disease and schizophrenia. Same page, same font, and not the same kind of claim. On the left it is one gene with one break in it. Cystic fibrosis leaves you short of a working protein. Huntington's leaves a changed one running. Either way you can point at the gene. On the right, no single variant breaks anything by itself. Thousands of them each move a probability by an amount too small to draw. The score is their sum, and no one variant is the reason. One half of the page found a mechanism. The other found a correlation in a database of adults. Plenty of traits have an association somewhere in the literature. Fewer survive being turned into a score that ranks 4 embryos from one family. Fewer still come with evidence that choosing on that score changes what happens to the child. Not evidence that it cannot. Evidence that it does.
Which result would make us transfer a different embryo?
The report supports discussion rather than directing embryo selection.
Take the easiest case in the catalog. Height is the trait these models predict best, and nobody has to argue about what tallness is. Almost everything you actually care about is predicted worse. So Caravani and colleagues tested the score on people who already existed. 28 real families with several grown siblings each. A height score was calculated for every one of them. Nobody is choosing between an embryo and a suspiciously tall stranger. Every option shares the same 2 parents. The model's pick is the sibling with the highest score, the one the ranking would have chosen before anybody was measured. Then they measured them, grown adults standing against a wall. The highest scoring sibling was actually the tallest in 7 families out of 28, 25%. Those families averaged about 10 siblings. So a random pick would be right about 1 time in 10. The bar is on the floor, and the score does clear it.
So it works.
It beats guessing. 3 times out of 4, it still picked the wrong child. Wrong meaning not the tallest. The only thing it was asked to find, 10 embryos from one couple. Their scores sit close together because meiosis is dealing from the same 2 parents. The population is off to both sides. Each dot is a score. The cloud above it is not other embryos. It is the range of adults that score is still compatible with. Now the other 9. The clouds overlap because the score is only part of the story. The rest of the genome and all of childhood kept their voting rights. Pick one outcome in that overlap, and none of the 10 is ruled out. Ranking sorts the dots. It cannot sort the clouds. Take the ranking at its word and pick the rightmost dot. The predicted average slides right. That movement is the product.
I'll take the average.
An average is a statement about many children. You are having one. Now watch the interval open underneath it. That is where one actual child can land. The average moved and the interval did not narrow. You get one draw from the wide part. Nobody in this photograph came with a confidence interval. So what is the score? Start with the places in the genome where people differ. Everyone that makes the cut gets a weight from a very large study. Most are almost nothing. Add them up anyway, and one number comes out. It only means something next to the same number in the people it was fitted on. One of the biggest sources of those weights is UK Biobank. About 500,000 volunteers aged 40 to 69 when they joined. The associations were measured in adults who had already lived most of a life. They are applied to a 5-day-old ball of cells that has not lived any of one.
It predicts across the plot.
Across the plot it does. 3 families and 3 clouds, in one line through all of them that any statistician would sign. The only slope you are buying is the one inside your own color. Those 4 share both parents, and roughly half the score variance is already gone. What is usually left is a shorter line and a flatter one. Between family prediction and within family prediction are different quantities, and only one was quoted. Then there is the question of who ended up in that study. Nobody was conscripted. Everybody had to open a letter and say yes. 9.2 million people were invited. 5.5% joined. That is roughly 1 in 18. And the one who joined is not a random one. Participants are healthier, richer, and better educated than the population the score gets sold to.
So the survivors are informative.
Volunteers about several things at once.
They adjusted for 10 ancestry components.
Adjusting for 10 components squeezes out the continental scale differences, the ones where ancestry can pass for prediction. It works at that scale. It does not finish. Once the components are gone, the map underneath is still there. Britain has more than 10 places. This is 1,000 people sorted only by their DNA. Location was not one of the inputs. It found 23 clusters and drew something indecently close to the coastline. 10 covariates were never meant to be an exorcism. Take a polygenic score for education and average it by region. The high values find a small number of suitable postcodes. Now measure the same country with unemployment and cars and home ownership and overcrowding. The postcodes remain suitable. The third panel is not a measurement. It is a list of things that closed. In England, 124 pits closed after 1981. The same handful of places answers all 3. Abdellaoui and colleagues started with 450,000 people. The alleles that track less education clustered in the poorer areas, and the abstract names the mining ones.
Geographic clustering is included in the regional package.
Correct. The people remain uncorrected. The author's explanation is migration. The pits closed. The people who left score higher on average than the rest of Britain. The people who stayed were still at that address when the biobank came round. They are the regional average. The score reads inherited variance. The map reads where the coal was, so researchers tried to separate the two. Okibe and colleagues compared children while holding the parents' scores steady. What does a child's own DNA still predict once you account for what the parents were carrying anyway? That leftover's the direct effect. It works because siblings inherit different shuffled halves from the same 2 people. Comparing inside one family strips out the address and most of what traveled with the surname. The direct part came out at roughly half the ordinary association. The score still predicts. It just stopped getting full credit for the household.
Half is still a lot.
It is half of a number that was being quoted whole. The missing half is not noise. Most of it is prediction that never traveled through the embryo's own DNA. The suspects are known. Some of it runs through the parents themselves. Some of it is who marries whom. Some of it is population structure. The remainder is filed under other. The parental route has a clean measurement, and it came out of Iceland. Decode had more than 21,000 people with at least one parent genotyped. They scored the parental alleles the children did not inherit. The half that stayed behind still predicted the child's schooling. The route runs through the relatives. Those alleles kept shaping the parents' own lives, and the parents built the room the child grew up in. It arrives at about 29.9% of the strength of the inherited half. The DNA missed the child. The parents did not. The third suspect starts before the embryo exists. Here are 2 people and their 2 scores. Draw a line between them, and under random pairing it carries nothing. Pairing is not random. People repeatedly end up with a partner who resembles them in education, and in much of what travels with it. So the real grid has a diagonal, sorting done by millions of people who thought they were just meeting somebody.
So the score is still predictive.
Yes. One partner's score now carries information about the other one and about the household the two of them go on to build.
Then it learned that from DNA.
It learned the correlation from the data set. The wedding contained data. Nobody signs a register expecting to improve a model. Adult outcomes enter on the left. Embryo decimals leave on the right. The span in between is where a prospective study would go.
Everything we publish is fully referenced.
Reference to what?
Adults. Publishing an embryo number before the follow-up exists would be irresponsible.
The follow-up finishes when the first customers are old enough to get the diseases. The report also gives a percentile. Percentile means a position in a crowd, so the question is which crowd? The crowd is adults. Their outcome was already on file when the score was fitted.
Where are my embryos on it?
They are ranked.
It was a fair question. His four are not on that curve. Their scores are. An embryo has been genotyped. It has not been anything else yet. The percentile is his arithmetic ranked against their lives. Then there's the schizophrenia line. That number has a longer history than the embryo does. 76,000 people with a schizophrenia diagnosis and 243,000 controls, pooled by a consortium whose stated point was to understand the biology and treat it. It found 287 places in the genome where common variation tracks the diagnosis, and a score sweeps up far more than that. That number is now on a menu. In May of 2021, the International Society of Psychiatric Genetics became the first professional body to address it. The accuracy with which a polygenic score can predict psychiatric illnesses is currently not sufficient for clinical use. That is the professional register for no. The society for the field that built the score says it is not accurate enough for the clinic. It is sold in one. Does acting on it leave anybody better off? The societies that examined it stopped there. In 2024, the American College of Medical Genetics and Genomics called it not recommended for clinical use. In 2025, the American Society for Reproductive Medicine said it should not be offered as a reproductive service. The order form has no rungs. It has 4 steps and none of them are about the child.
The evidence is still developing. Access is available today.
She is right. Nothing in a checkout flow asks whether the children come out better. Then the ranking met the rest of IVF. An embryo has to survive being thawed. Then it has to implant. Neither of those is obliged to agree with the ranking. The one that became a person was 4th.
Was the ranking worth it?
That question has an answer at the size of a population. Randomly assign families to the score or to the usual way of choosing, then follow the children for decades. Nobody has completed that study. A finished one would report an average, not who embryo number 1 would have been. You have the child you have. The comparison child does not exist.